Do you need one now?
I'm at that age, you know.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Abbey. I have told the baristas that whenever a BLT or a chicken salad sandwich is ready, just to yell it out, no matter what's going on. So pay attention to those announcements so that you get your sandwich or your drink or whatever you have ordered. My name is the Reverend Katie Nakamura Ringers. I am at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and I'm also the director and the vicar here at the Abbey. This is a church and a coffee shop. Thank you. So we opened last Valentine's Day. We've been open about 7 months. And as most of you know, the mission of the Abbey is to be a safe and comfortable place where the traditions of Christianity can be rediscovered and reimagined. So a safe and comfortable space for those traditions to be rediscovered and reimagined in new and interesting ways. And part of that mission is to have these theological conversations that we're about to get started. Ways that you can be involved and help out the Abbey are by doing wonderful things that you would do anyway, like buying coffee here and buying your sandwiches here. So if at any time during this talk you want to haul yourself up to the cash register and buy some coffee, we welcome that. Feel free, as you are doing, to rearrange furniture and get to where you can see. I want to put in a plug for the artwork on the walls. This is new art that has been up since the beginning of September by Laura Tucker. There's the artist right here. And most of these pieces, if they have not already been sold, are up for purchase. And you can always ask Laura about her inspiration and about different pieces if you would like. The other way you can help the Abbey out, especially tonight, is by voting for your favorite clergy person. After this debate is over, we are going to determine the winner yes.
I have an announcement. Can I make an announcement?
All right, 5 minutes.
The deacon is donating 10% of his salary from St. Luke's tonight to the Abbey.
That's a good raise your
Yeah, that's an important question. That deacon, I think, is offering.
Our deacon is poor.
No, but seriously, get out your loose change and maybe even your checkbook, because we will vote for the winner of this debate by passing around the sacks with their pictures on it, and you will vote. You will vote with your change. You will vote with your check, and that money will go towards the mission of the Abbey. It'll go towards helping us live out that mission to be a safe place for theological conversation. Part of it will go towards our community gift card, which helps us give coffee and sandwiches to folks who come in here and maybe can't afford it. So on that note, this is our first of a series of theological debates. So it's not exactly a debate, it's going to be a very feisty conversation. The series is called Small Thoughts on Large Matters. And this particular edition is Priest of the Empire or Prophet of the Resistance.
Go Prophet!
Can't stop quit.
And I talked two of my best friends and clergy colleagues into taking part in this round one. Rich Webster, of course, is the rector of St. Luke's Church in Mountain Brook. And the Reverend Dr. Mark LaGory is the deacon at St. Luke's. And as you will find out probably in his presentation, the author of many a paper about homelessness in Birmingham. So we will ask him some questions about that as well. All right, all ready?
We're ready.
They are ready. All right, and we are setting a timer, and for this first one, we're going to set the timer for, let's say 4 minutes. Kelly,
You
you
said 5.
do need 5.
Well, listen at it and you'll get it.
All right, well, we'll call close to time at 4 minutes, and you will get 5. So let's start with Mark, and then we'll move on to Rich. But we'll start with Mark for this first one. Tell us, Mark, what a prophet of resistance is.
Okay. Well, first, let me tell you that I think that the time is right for prophets for the resistance. We've got plenty of priests in the empire right now. We live in a time where a very few have a whole lot, and very many have just a little. And I would like to see, as Amos would say, don't give me the clangs of your bells and all that fancy worship and all that fancy talk. Let mighty waters roll down. Let justice roll down as mighty waters. What's a prophet first, and then prophet of resistance, and why do we need it? A prophet is someone who calls it like it is, and then says how that conflicts with God's dreams and hopes for the world. A prophet is someone, I think, who speaks for the people who have little voice in God's word. A prophet of the resistance is someone who takes that prophecy role and essentially says, look, I'm presenting you God's hopes and dreams for the world, and we need dramatic change. We need a revolution, but the revolution we need has to fit with God's hopes and dreams for that world. And that means a revolution that involves love, a revolution that's peaceful, a revolution like the revolution that took place in Birmingham in the 1960s with Martin Luther King. We got plenty of priests of the empire. What a prophet has on their side is God's hopes and dreams for the world. He's not, or she is not beholden to anybody. Basic sociology. If you live in the empire, you depend on the empire for your sustenance and power. No matter how good your intentions are, no matter how you're centered in the gospel, you are dependent to one extent or another on the empire for your existence. And what essentially that means is the most you can hope for in terms of change, no matter how committed you are to change and mercy, the most you can hope for is to have a small increment of change that is always going to be in favor of the powerful. So as a change agent, you're hurt by that contact with the empire. Eat in country clubs, pray in the halls of governments, and you owe somebody in the process, no matter what your intentions are. It's just basic sociology. Why do we need prophets right now? Because we live in a divided society. I wrote a book called Unhealthy Places 5 years ago that essentially argued that, look, for the last 40 years, what's happened after the civil rights movement is that we divided people up. There are walls that are built. There's a wall right across the railroad tracks here. It's invisible, but it's real. High poverty ghettos grew for the last 40 years. They doubled. And the poor African Americans living in them doubled as well. The same thing is true for Hispanics. Those walls needed to tumble down. Right now, do I have a minute? Or?
Yeah, one minute.
All right. The average white person in our society right now has 7 times more wealth than the average African American. The incarceration rate for African Americans is 6 times higher than for whites. If you look at the United States in terms of its inequality, 70% of the world's nations have more equal social systems than we do. My wife just said I'm finished. I know, wait, just one more. Just one more. 15 wealthiest nations in the world, we have the highest child poverty rate. Let justice roll down like waters.
Thank you. Amen. I won't need that long, but I do need to thank Katie for taking a picture that I've never seen before that makes me look like Jim Jones. So let's get the
If you didn't get one, get a commemorative fan for this event. There's some on the
in the
table.
jungle. Okay, so Katie asked that this first round be an opportunity for us to lay out our position before we answer specific questions. And I think empire is a misleading word. And I want to say carefully what I believe I'm defending here. First of all, oftentimes the beef that we have with the church or quote priest of empire is the beef with Constantine, not with scriptural Christianity. And I'm going to make a case that there's a place for a church like St. Luke's that is both scriptural and faithful and also addresses the problems, the systemic problems that Mark highlighted. We're not in by no means disagreement with this, and St. Luke's is the kind of church that is by no means satisfied with Birmingham the way that it is. What I would like to say is that oftentimes a church like St. Luke's, and I'm going to offer tonight an apology for a church like St. Luke's, not an apology for its existence, but an apology for its ministry. Okay, and I want to convince you, will seek to convince you that being a priest of a fluent, connected church is actually central to accomplishing the goals that Mark laid out, or the problems that Mark laid out. Many people don't understand Mount Brook. And yes, there is wretched excess. Yes, there is Beverly Hills style affluence, I should say. Yes, there is a lot of waste, perhaps. But at St. Luke's, what people need to remember is what we are doing is leveraging connectivity. It's a high concentration of educated and able people who can change the world. They come to this church in order to be mobilized for mission. So they're able to do things like this coffee shop, okay, or preschool partners, or the Norwood Resource Center, or seeking to solve food deserts in North Birmingham. I'll lay out some more specific cases as I seek to use scripture, tradition, and reason, but to simply say for now that churches like ours have an important role if they remember to stay clear of the Constantinian Empire and really more towards the kingdom of God.
Next. And I should note, which I didn't do before, I asked Rich and Mark to take positions on this based on what they felt comfortable defending, but probably what they feel in their hearts and what they know in their heads, something a little bit more nuanced in between of what they're talking about. I also failed to mention that we are streaming online, so.
Hey, Mom.
Look pretty.
Hey, Elise.
And if you know somebody that might be missing out on this conversation, let them know that is available to them as well. Okay, so as Episcopalians, Mark and Rich, right, we are bound by that three-legged stool of scripture and tradition and reason. Let's get quoting some scripture. Let's get some Bible in here. Yeah. Mark, what would Jesus say about this?
I'm gonna play the Jesus card tonight. Jesus had a lot to say about the poor. From the quote in Mark, I think it's 5. I'm not good at chapters, but I think it's 5 or 6, where he talks about sending the disciples out. Take no purse, take no money, take no bread. Go with God's dream and take it out into the world. That's what we're called to do. Jesus was someone who spent almost all of his time, except for the last week or two of his life, in a backwater place most of the time, on the margins of society. If you look at him, he liked to hang around with the unrespectable types. Born of an unwed mother, you've heard this before many times, lived in a backwater place, was a refugee into Egypt, born homeless. Okay, one of the great representations of Jesus. Jesus preached the greatest sermon on the Mount, and the best part of that for me was the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. The way he preached, the way he prayed, the Our Father that we mumble every Sunday and know by heart, but don't pay much attention to. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus, throughout his life, stressed the coming kingdom, preached the coming kingdom. The last thing he did in his life, or one of the last things he did in his life before that unrespectable crucifixion by the Romans was to overturn the tables in the temple. That was symbolic. It had less to do with his objection to the merchants selling their goods. He knew how the temple culture worked, but more to do with overturning the empire's power. Jesus used words to describe himself which very much were empire words for the Roman Empire, the Roman emperor, and their notion of the emperor as divine, the Son of God, the Son of Man. Those are terms the Romans used. So.
Let's hear from Rich.
Sure. I'm going to start. Being Episcopalian, we also believe that all Scripture was written for our learning. So I'm going to start not with the Gospels, but with Paul. In Acts chapter 18, we learn that Paul arrives in Corinth, and he meets up with two friends who are currently in exile from Rome. The names are Priscilla and Aquila. We all grew up knowing that St. Paul's a tent maker. What we probably don't realize is that being a second-generation Roman citizen, he was probably a person with money. And he was really more of a tent rep of a family business, especially when you had Roman legions nearby where you could have large military contracts. He was a person of means. He was able to travel 10,000 miles for a reason. He had business connections in each city. Priscilla and Aquila and a man named Titus Justus actually donated a synagogue, a place of worship, for that Christian community there. They're also referenced in his first letter to the Corinthians, thanking them for the good work. The word Stephanos actually means crowned one. Titus Justus had been crowned for his giving of the synagogue, if you will. This happens again and again. A sociologist named Rodney Stark actually took a control group of first century people and saw that St. Paul, if you look at all the 97 people in the New Testament, either referenced as friends of Paul's or mentioned by Paul, his friends were 10 times the number of connected, wealthy people than an average first century person. So that connectivity and that generosity actually made the Christian movement happen in the Eastern Mediterranean. He was headed to the Western Mediterranean when he was arrested and taken to Rome and killed. Jesus is also hard to pin down. He ate in the home of Pharisees, which meant that he honored the religious leaders of his day. Nicodemus, his friend, is remembered in the Talmud as a wealthy and holy man. These were by no means not unconnected people. Joseph of Arimathea was a wealthy man who donated his tomb for Jesus' burial. So Jesus, for me, what I see Jesus doing is asking people to die to self. That didn't necessarily mean give away who you were, but rather die to ambition. See agape as a lens through which you see the world. How can you use what God has given you or what you have accomplished, the gifts that you have perhaps, in order to affect the kingdom and to help the least of these? I think that's Paul's legacy. Also, want to remind you, there's an Old Testament legacy as well. Nathan was a court prophet, and he was close to the king. He was able to say things to David that no one else could say. And he was able to say, "You are the man," and call him out, reminding the powerful that no one is above God's law. That's the role of someone close to connectivity. I'll stop there.
So, it sounds like Scripture is somewhat, ambiguous on this subject. Mark's got a point. Rich has got a point. So when we look, but there's been 2,000 years, right, since Priscilla and Aquila and Jesus and his 12 disciples who were wandering around. Where have Christians fallen on this point of what should the church be like? Should the church be wealthy? And what should individual people and maybe particularly clergy? How should they live their lives?
Well, first of all, I want to make a couple of points about what the gospel means. It means good news. When Jesus unrolled that scroll, he took the scroll of a prophet, Isaiah, and he announced good news for the poor, the widows, and the orphan. The gospel means good news, and it's referenced to the poor specifically. How does church tradition fit into this? Well, that passage I talked about before in all the synoptics about, the disciples going on the road with little money or resources has a tradition in the Catholic Church particularly. where religious orders take a vow of poverty. I don't think they mean it, but they do take it. They don't own property per se. They don't own a house. They don't own a car. The order owns it. It's a little bit of a cop-out, but the idea behind it is that your possessions own you, and it's very scriptural. So you have to be careful. That what you should own is the gospel, not possessions. And of course the great heroes in the church. I'll pick the Deacon, St. Francis. The whole tradition of Francis now being carried on by a pope who almost sounds like someone of the empire, but it is totally opposed to the trappings of the empire in his daily life, Pope Francis. But Francis, the classic example of this in the church is Francis spent all of his time insisting, no, I just want to be a deacon. I just want to be a deacon. I don't want to be ordained a priest, because that is a position that I think is important for me to take. I embrace Lady Poverty. Deacons, that whole order in the church, starts off in Acts 6 as the voice for the outsiders in the early church, the voice for the Gentiles in the early church. They were there to communicate their needs. And when they went beyond it, like Stephen, and preached that long sermon, what happened to him? He kind of got stoned, in not the way we meant it in the 60s. Deacons particularly are intended as an order that has a prophetic role. We're not paid. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge or an issue. But the point is that we are not owned by anyone. We have no clear boss. Rich is my boss in one sense. Bishop is my boss in another. I'm not paid by anybody. My boss is the gospel, okay? And this vision of the kingdom of God, which is expansive and which has always had this tradition in the church. And what I love, am I finished?
So that's your 1 minute warning.
Okay, wonderful. What I love about Pope Francis is what he's doing in the Vatican right now is an expression of a prophet of the resistance. One of the first things he did besides the Holy Thursday services where he's washing the feet of women and prisoners is he set up bathrooms and showers along the square at the Vatican. If you've ever been there, this is this imposing, powerful place. And there are now bathrooms and showers set up on the edges. That's the prophet of resistance. That has a tradition in the church, but they're always fighting with the power of the church as an institution. That's why I think deacons are important in this. I am the prophet of resistance, supported by the priest of the empire.
He's our house prophet. We like having him around. Katie, to answer your question, lines aren't always that easily drawn. At a football game in our community near the church, we played a local team, a team from another municipality. They wrote a really ugly sign on the uprights. It was the run-through sign, and they said that our children were entitled, and they drew dollar signs on that. And I was really proud of our local coach who said, actually, we're not entitled. I spent a lot of time trying to teach our children character. It revealed that really that people can easily demonize affluence and success, and rather than seeking to channel it and seeking to shape it. I think there's an important role for a minister to be in a community and not be too different from it so that one can build bonds of trust. Of course, we can't be tacky. That's part of the problem of Constantine, right? I mean, if you see a preacher in a too fine of a car with too fine of clothes. I am reminded though that when I was going through the ordination process, Bishop Parsley said, "Rich, I believe you will be the best dressed priest in the diocese." And I said, "Henry, if I don't have dandruff, I'm already the best dressed." Okay, so I know. I'm just being silly. And so if one is too different, then one can't reach people, one can't reach children. For instance, I was, speaking of the football team, I was chaplain to the football team when my child played there. If I were to distance myself too much from their world, from the trajectory of their lives, which was for the most part college and perhaps grad school, if I were to rail too much for that particular community against that community, I wouldn't voice that community. I wouldn't be trusted by the community, and I wouldn't be able to change the hearts of people who perhaps can change the world, at least in their own ways. Rich people need Jesus too, and by this global standards, of course, everyone in the community around my church is affluent, and by Birmingham standards affluent. But what we do at St. Luke's, which is very, very important, is we teach them to be kind. Kindness can also mean having the simple kindness of reaching people where they are. Again, I don't mean a sellout. That's a fine line, but respecting people enough to live in their world and to appreciate their world, so that we can get them focused from their world out into the larger world, I think is also an important role, and it's scriptural, as I've mentioned. As far as our tradition goes, let's remember, we're the church of the elites. We are, as an Episcopal church. That is both good and bad news. The bad news is that's the problem of Constantine. We can lose our way. The good news is our church can produce who will before us to end slavery. For those of you who know your Alabama history, we produced Edgar Garner Murphy, who ended child labor in Prattville in the mills. Okay, and so we can end food deserts now, because we know business people and we know connected people who can do public-private partnerships and can find out ways to reduce the margins so that we can get businesses and give dignity to our neighborhoods. But we've got to mobilize them, and we can't make them mad. We can't tell them that they're bad. What we need to do is find them where they are and unlock the faith within. I'll stop.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking about sort of the big inspiring religious figures of our time and of previous centuries. I'm thinking about St. Francis, who went out, and you imagine him, washing lepers in his old brown habit, and with holes in it. And I'm thinking about Mother Teresa, who was always poor and on the streets of India and Calcutta. I'm thinking about Gandhi. You see him, on his hunger strikes, and so Rich, I'm gonna pose this question to you first, and then we'll get Mark to respond. How, as a priest of the empire, could you or St. Luke's inspire that kind of discipleship or that kind of social change?
Sure. Can I use Birmingham as an example? Okay, I'm a child of this community. I grew up in segregated Bessemer. I'm on 52. I'm old enough to remember it. My elementary school was integrated in the 4th grade by a member of St. Luke's, by federal court order, and he did it at great personal risk. That's one example. Sam Corner received death threats for what he did for me. I will tell anybody, and I said this when I buried him, that he saved my life. I'm the man who I am today because of the courage of a man from St. Luke's. That's the first way that connected people, connectivity, which is a word I prefer to use to empire, can change the world. I also believe that the revolution that happened in our city a half a century ago was white hot, and it needed to be. It was time for war. I personally believe, and this informs my theology, that we're not in a time of revolution now, we're in a time of reconstruction. The reason why I say this is because the work is not finished, but the work that needs to be done now is the work that doesn't get in the newspapers. It's the quiet work of friendships and community building. It's the quiet work of coalition building. One of the most important things that we were able to do with Preschool Partners, which is a ministry of our connected church, is to teach families to be teach the system, not simply teach preschool children, but teach families how to be a community together. One quick example. We took them on a tour of the Christmas lights of the community around our church. And that might seem a little patronizing or patriarchal. We just wanted them to see some beauty at Christmas time. They were fascinated instead by the fact that the windows in our community are open at night. Okay? They were fascinated by the fact that we don't live in fear. So what we learned to appreciate, learning from them, is that we spent the next decade working on building communities so that they would have friends and step out behind locked doors and have a unified school, have a unified PTO, have a unified neighborhood association, which they have now. So it's through friendships and it's through the quiet work. They'll never make the newspaper. Picket signs always get on the news. You know, the loudest voices always get the press. AL.com does that. They don't care that people are actually running in Norwood on September 26th at, you know, at 8 in the morning, two communities together and making one city. That's just not sexy. Rather, what they want is division and friction. I believe that the hardest work is ahead of us, and that's the work that's going to require all of us to use our brains and our connectivity and our friendships in this city. And if the burden's on us.
Mark, what do you have to say to that?
Connectivity is the answer. The problem is that we are a disconnected society, and that all the movement in our society at this point, even with the most well-intentioned people, tends to be, we're going to tell them what they need. We need to have a relationship, not just connections, but relationships with the voiceless. The reality of our society, if you watched the debate last night, and yes, I'm a Democrat, but I'm objective enough to say that was just awful. And it was awful because it said nothing relevant about our society right now. It said nothing about God's hopes and dreams for the world. It said everything about division. The vision of the prophet of resistance is not a sign. It's not marching around or yelling at the enemy. The enemy is us, all of us, because we don't connect with one another. Because there are voiceless in our community who are literally suffering. The statistic I gave you before about high poverty ghettos doubling in our society over the last 40 years, and the number of people, African Americans living in them doubling, is critically important. The revolution is not over. The revolution is just beginning. We cannot say that we're at a time where the small work needs to be done. The big work has to be done. There is a voiceless community in our society right now. We are both working. We are both working to try to figure out how to do that. We're in partnership. We are not enemies. Rich and poor are not enemies, but they do have different interests at the moment.
I'm not rich though.
And neither am I.
Okay.
We both have kind of funny cars. But that disrupted my cheating. Here's my point. Okay, we need to bring into the discussion, the public discussion right now, and the churches need to do this. We need to bring into the public discussion this great division which exists in our society between rich and poor, between black and white. That's God's dream for the world. And damn it, it wasn't even talked about by anyone last night at all. We, the church, needs to be talking about it. And we need to be talking about it now, because there are people whose life expectancies are extremely low. There are people that cannot raise a family in this community because we don't pay them anywhere near a living wage. We ought to be damn mad about it, okay? But we ought to be mad in love about it. We ought to be able to articulate assertively the problem and the dream. And if we do that, okay, we are prophets. We are all prophets of resistance. We're saying we don't need an empire to do this. We simply need God's help.
So I've got one last question, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to anyone who would like to make a comment or ask a question. And I did not prepare you for this question, but here it is. Because we are at the Abbey, which is a new kind of church in the 21st century, it seems to me like for the last 50 or so years, the church, so the Protestant church anyway, has held a position and an authority and a wealth really in society, and that might be slipping at this point in time. And I mean, that's why we're opening up a coffee shop church. The Episcopal Church is getting smaller. It seems like some of that authority, that empire is maybe dwindling a little bit, but I'll let you speak to that. And at the same time, one of the things the Episcopal Church is criticized for is being a church of upper middle class and wealthy people. So with sort of those two things in mind, what would you like to see the church looking like in the years to come?
Can I go first?
Yeah, go first.
I want us to be relevant to the needs of the society at the moment. And I mean, everybody has an interest in the poor. If the poor aren't eating, if the poor are dying early, if they're not getting jobs because our society is broken, everybody is hurting. We know that for a fact. We have the worst health of any developed nation. Okay, and the reason that medical sociologists give for that is the great divide in our society between rich and poor. So first of all, the church has to be relevant. The Abbey has to get across the railroad tracks. It can't just simply be a place where cool people come and drink coffee. It has to be a place where cool people share a cookie with somebody over on the other side of the tracks. That's what millennials want. You know, we know right now that 43% of the adult population is churchless, and over 30% of millennials, okay, are nuns, and I'm not talking about the ones in habits, okay, and they're that way because the church in their eyes is mean. The people that speak for Christianity are mean, not kind, and the church is irrelevant to their lives. So we need to be talking about maybe the most relevant thing I've ever read, which is the gospel. We need to live it. We need to be it. We need to be over there. I learned years ago as a guy in the ivory tower that the only way to understand homelessness wasn't to gather all the statistics, but it was to talk to the people that were homeless. I never forget a chat I had with a woman by the railroad tracks down on 21st Street. Her ankle swollen. She was in her 40s. She looked like she was 70 years old. And I was asking her about spirituality. That was one of the things we were doing in our research. And she sounded like a monk or a nun. And I had to stop the conversation. I had to say, ma'am, pardon me, but I don't understand this. You are poor, you are sick, you just told me how you're disconnected with your family. How can you be so spiritual? How can God be so much a part of your life? And she looked at me as if I was the dumbest ass on earth and said, son, God's all I have. And that's the difficulty of being well off. Okay, we have so much that we forget the very thing that brought us into this life, the very life that brought us here in our relationship with God. So we're on this. We are of the same mind and the same pursuit. But the one thing I'm concerned about is that we say it. We preach it, we do it, we live it. We don't stay inside these walls. Our mission is out there, not in here.
Thanks, Mark.
Katie, I have a role in St. Luke's, and Mark has a role in St. Luke's, and Mark faithfully exercises his ministry as a deacon in that role. I have to, as a leader of a congregation in an affluent community, I have to go up about 30,000 feet and try to accomplish something different, and that is call people to worship. I want to remind you all, if you're thinking about millennials and attracting them to the Episcopal Church, anybody can get information about anything on the phone. Okay, they can get any political position on the phone. They can learn any sociological table on the phone. They can learn about child mortality on the phone. People don't come to church. If they're going to give us some time, they're not coming to church for information. They're coming to church for worship. They're coming to church for their hearts to be changed. When we can change hearts and minds towards empathy, towards a capacity to encompass ambiguity, towards a heart for change, then they can become aware that ours is a city with a mountain down the middle, with the haves on one side and the have-nots on the other. They can begin to dream of a Birmingham that God dreams of. But it has to start with changing hearts through worship. I think the problem with the Episcopal Church is we've gotten there's a shadow side to activism, and that shadow side is arrogance. And so we've become so preachy that we only attract the like-minded and we drive off the rest. I've said to some friends, said this to my friend Daniel right there, we need to be humble enough to try to change the heart of Rick and Bubba, because Rick and Bubba reach a lot more people than we do. Okay, and if you can change their hearts and get their message, get them saying our message on the radio, then we can attract more than the tiny fragment of people the Episcopal Church is currently reaching right now. We can reach the masses, and then they can change. One final thing I'll say about connectivity. If we can show the humility to say that we might be wrong, I think that we can attract people, but we have to have the courage to attract people who don't agree with us. Could we have the courage to walk hand in hand with other members of other Protestant denominations and change our cities? Can we do it, or does it have to be on our terms? I'm afraid that resistance sometimes can take on the shell, if you will, of a closed mind in a different way. The problems are too acute for us not to work with people with whom we have theological disagreements. We just have to have it. We have to have the humility. So what I wanted to say, Katie, is to answer your question. I think the future of the Episcopal Church is to center back to what we do best, which is worship in the presence of the Holy One, and then through those changed hearts, see the world in a different way.
Thanks, Rich. All right, it is time for some comments and questions from the crowd. Zach.
Can you stretch? Stand up. And a quick stretch if you need it.
Take it easy on the
Yeah, don't be mean.
I apologize for
Time.
that. Hey, I guess I'm Zach. I come to church here at the Abbey. I know both of these guys, so. Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, we speak of the empire mostly in money, but you're talking about across the railroad tracks, you're talking about millennials. So when I think of empire, specifically the Episcopal Church, I see the Episcopal Church as sort of this established church of people in power. White, males, cisgendered, straight, very highly educated, and much older, like baby boomer generation. So both of you seem to fit into that. So how does the church preach the gospel to people that don't necessarily fit into that? Like, how do you reach people when the church doesn't look like them? How do you reconcile that? Not just money-wise, but all the other things that the Episcopal Church seems to represent.
That's a great question. You want to answer?
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, I think we need to be honest and say that some of what the Episcopal Church deals with is the burden of history. We are who we are. We came from a church of the elites. That's the burden of what we've been given. You could say it that way. Another way you could look at it is that's also a gift, which is the point that I've been trying to make with you guys, which is to say we can lean into who we are and be authentic. Zach, it occurs to me that as I get to be friends with millennials and get to know millennial people and get into your minds, it occurs to me that what people really want in 2015 is authenticity. So nothing is more stupid than me to try to be you. I can't do it. I can only be me. And so the things I like may be really, really cool for younger people, but I'm learning that if I'm just honest about who I am and honest about my heart, and my heart is for the down and outs and forgottens of our city, and that's where my heart ultimately, lies. I think if I could be who I am, I have found that St. Luke's continues to attract very different kinds of people because they just kind of like that we're honest about who we are. We can't pick St. Luke's up and move it somewhere else, but what we can do is we can say, okay, we've been given a gift. It's a blessing and a curse. How can we take this blessing, right, and use it for change? I don't know many young people that wouldn't be attracted to people who are simply honest about themselves and not asking you to change. I do think the challenge for the established church, if you will, is to remember to get out of our own way, try to meet people where they are. And by the way, we've never lived in a more exciting time. There's never been more groups of people, and we've got to be honest with the fact that St. Luke's perhaps we couldn't have the Abbey at St. Luke's, but we brought it to Avondale. That's the heart of a church that seeks to reach people where they are. So whether you know it or not, Zach, I kind of think you're kind of mine, and because I love you and you're here, and so vicariously through Katie, who is also a priest at St. Luke's, you're in my family. So that's kind of a cool way. That's just kind of a cool way to be. But at the same time, you're going to like different things than I do, and you're going to see the world differently. So you're going to teach me, and then hopefully we're going to have a relationship where you can trust me too to be a good guy and help change the world. Okay?
Rich keeps talking about connectivity, and that is incredibly enticing and important for what we do. And that's also my model of the prophet of resistance, is bringing a people in to the conversation. It's a conversation, Zach, and we all need to be listening to one another. We need to learn from one another, as Rich says. I think the model for the church in the 21st century is round tables. It's very much like the ancient church, where people sat and talked, shared their stories about their memories of Jesus, heard them, ate together, and in the process became a church. We're becoming a church. Thank God, because millennials like you are willing to come. But we can't simply say, we've got our door open here, and by the way, we've got wonderful coffee. We also have to do listening, which involves the courage to go to places we don't understand, and instead of teaching them, listen. The best part about the Christian church has always been the stories. The worst part about the Episcopal Church in Birmingham is we didn't listen to our own history during the 60s. The bishop was so involved with growing the church and doing the things at the Empire and making sure that there were a lot of confirmations and everything else. Every time I ask about Bishop Carpenter, and this isn't to demonize him, I hear two things. He had a powerful voice and he had big hands. And that was because his role was getting as many people into the church as possible. And God love him, that's important. That really is important. But he didn't listen. He didn't listen to the world outside that was happening in Birmingham. When the 4 little girls were killed in the 16th Street Church, there was nothing said about it officially. Nothing said about it except an editorial by the editor of the paper. Bishop Carpenter never said anything publicly about it. We need to continually be in conversation with people that we don't share things in common with, because that's how we grow. That's how we become the people of God. That's God's vision of the world, is a people that learn from each other, share stories with one another, and become heaven. Become the kingdom of God on earth. That's why we do communion every Sunday.
Got another question?
Yes, and I'm going to kind of say it in a roundabout way. I grew up 3 doors down from St. Luke's, and I remember when it was just a wooded lot with a house on stilts, is what I would call it. We used to dare each other to go in that house because there was supposed to be a wild animal in it. But on Sunday morning, as a teenager, I would hear the bells from St. Luke's. I grabbed my pillow and I said, damn little bell. I just put the pillow over my head and I go back to sleep. I went to the Baptist church down the road at Mount Baptist Church. But what I want to bring to you is the fact that I am a Stephen minister. And approximately 5 years ago, I was asked to take on one of our GED people who had asked for a Stephen minister. And I think it was a very bold move on her part, but she had read the little literature that was out in the hall about when you're going through tough times. And of course, the vision of a Stephen minister is to be a listener. It's not one, I'm not supposed to do all the talking. That is absolutely against my nature. It is very hard for me to do. But I listened a lot, and I quickly learned through this young lady that the Stephen ministry program was not for her. What she needed is a guardian angel. And she lived over here on the other side of the tracks at the Tom Brown little community, which is public housing. And she had it all worked out pretty well. She had her kids in the school across the street. And then as the oldest child got older, he got into some trouble and they turned her out. And when they turned her out of Tom Brown, then she went into a housing situation that was condemned, that she'd never been rented. Long story short is it kept going on and on. And for me personally, I had to enlist the help of Mark LaGory, he already knows about this person, to help me get her electricity bill paid from that house that was condemned. It was $900 a month. And she's just living over here in Woodlawn. The house should never been rented to her, and ultimately it was condemned and nobody lives in it now. But she's now out in Fairfield. But when the young man got into some trouble in the public housing there, they wouldn't let her stay if he was going to live in the house. So they turned her out. But issue after issue after issue for this poor woman, it has been continual for 5 years. It's either been a health issue, or the son that's having it, the older son that's having all the problem he has seizures. And so he is really, disabled, but they lost the disability for him. So this woman has 3 kids and herself, and they get less than $1,000 a month. And so the problems are so continual. Now, what I'm bringing to you is this, is if I hadn't been asked to be her Stephen minister because they felt like I had the confidence or whatever to help her, how would I could have stayed in my ivory tower. I would have never known about this extreme issue that sits right in our own city.
Thank you. It's real important. People don't understand because we live in a divided society. We drive right by the suffering. We don't go into it. We're called to go into it. We're called to be a voice to the poor. Churches are great at charity. All charity does is continue the same old situation over and over again. Poverty is a structural problem. It's a problem that is societal, and until we get people to understand that people's poverty is not simply their responsibility, but the responsibility of the society, we can do all kinds of piecemeal things, but we can't overcome poverty. I'm sorry, there aren't that many success stories. We do Family Promise. The first families we did with Family Promise, lovely families. I remember Kim Kimberlin saying, well, they're moving out, they graduated from Family Promise. And I took them to their new apartment right by Birmingham Southern, and there was a crack house next door. And you know what? 2 weeks afterward, Mama was working at a pizza joint, and she couldn't watch the babies when they came home from school, so they were staying at a neighbor, and the policeman told Mama that the babies can't stay there anymore. That's a crack house. That's a crack house. We don't understand the challenges that the people who are hidden from us, segregated from us, have. We live in a segregated society. Let me give you one fact about Birmingham, and I'm going to shut up. The index of segregation for Birmingham in the 1970s was 70%. The index of segregation in Birmingham today is 70%. Do you know what that means? It means you would have, in order to get perfect integration, where the exact proportions of the races that exist in the whole are living in each neighborhood, you would have to move 70% of the population. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a society that at its very heart is an abomination compared to the dream God has for us. Why can't we figure out ways of giving people who are outside of our purview a voice? Why is that so threatening? Okay? The kind of resistance we're talking about here is the resistance of a Martin Luther King, who is now held up in our society by everyone because we've sanitized what he's done. And the society's forgotten about the challenges he put on the Episcopal Church here in town, and the letter he wrote to the empire, the church empire in Birmingham, and to Bishop Carpenter at the Birmingham jail. We have to get outside of our own lives and plunge. Rich is allowing me to do that, and I'm grateful for it. I love him for it. He has a heart for this. But as he said, he's constrained somewhat, okay?
Well, actually, Morgan, I thought something. I'm not sure that it's constrained. I think it's balance. And it just occurred to me when I heard your story. I think churches get into trouble when they're not both. The church needs both of us. Okay? The church needs both a priest to the community where they are, and also a prophet of the resistance. If the church is only a prophet of the resistance, it becomes a preachy sect, and it loses members, or it becomes distilled, and it becomes nothing but a church for blue dots and a red stake. That's all it becomes. If a church is only a worship center, then it can become an ivory tower where people can self-congratulate themselves and sing about the sweet by and by and wait for heaven when they go. But what I heard in your story is a synthesis through your story of who you are. It's the little Baptist girl singing the hymns and learning the books of the Bible and having sword drills, and then coming to the Episcopal Church and worshiping in the beauty of holiness. And those pretty stained glass windows at St. Mary's formed your heart to receive the call from God to be a Stephen minister and become a prophet of the resistance. It occurs to me that we have to be both. So when churches lose their balance, then we have one or the other. I just happen to think that our besetting sin as Episcopalians is we've gone too far to activism, and we've forgotten our center is also a church of worship and holiness. So if we can recover that and not lose the priorities of the city, then I think we're an unstoppable force.
Can I just say one thing? It's not argument, but in the heart of this conversation, he's absolutely right. We need both. But we need to have a clear message about the divide. It's not on anybody's agenda, really, in this city. Activism, we're not talking about activism here. Neither Rich or I are talking about that. That's not the debating point. The point is the church needs to articulate well God's dream for the world. And then we need to take it outside. And we need to give that dream a voice. We need to be out there. We need to plunge. We need to do much more out there. Building relationships, as Rich says, building connectivity. But the connectivity has to be such that the people who have little power in the society gain a voice in the process.
I asked this girl, I said, when was the last time you voted? Well, I haven't voted in a long time.
Do you have any other comments, questions?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. You referenced the Sermon on the Mount. Also, Jesus tells us to beware of false prophets and mean preachers. He gave us a little hint on how to do that. He said, look for their fruits. So what are the fruits that we should be looking for the voices of relevance today?
Can I go first? We have a new sticker at St. Luke's. I always love a sticker. I always love a slogan. It simply says, "Be kind." I really believe that kindness is a commodity that is rare and wondrous as the white Bengal tiger in our society. Okay, if we can accomplish that, we'll be down the road with a lot of these problems. I think we have worn a mask of inclusion, but we haven't been very kind. I think we've worn a mask of social justice, but we haven't been very kind. I'll try to say this more specifically. We got to be kind to everybody, and that includes the people over the mountain, but it also includes the people in Shelby County who don't think like we do or vote like we do. We need to quit looking down our highly educated noses at the world around us, and that kindness has got to reach out across all sorts of divides, not only the mountain, but also education and arrogance and ignorance and everything that's keeping the state back. The fact is, we live right now in a unicameral state. We can't do anything about it. What we can do is try to help our leaders, especially in Montgomery, learn what it means to actually be kind. So there's a lot of work to do. Yes, there's a lot of work to do right here across the tracks. There's a lot of work to do in Montgomery. There's a lot of work to do in society. And I think those are the fruits of St. Luke's, I hope.
And that kindness brings connectivity. The other thing that I think is a fruit of the Spirit, and we talk about these as spiritual gifts sometimes, the gifts of the prophet. And clearly one of the gifts of the prophet is being a teacher, being someone who shares their wisdom and knowledge. We're at a point in our society, and this has nothing to do with activism. Has something to do with developing a respect for knowledge, redeveloping that respect for knowledge. As a sociologist, it is important for me to find a way of communicating the reality of our society to the decision makers in the society and to those who participate in the division. Okay, some people don't have a choice in the division. Okay. Getting them a voice in this, getting them connected. I totally agree with Rich. This is about connections. But remember that Paul spent most of his time in the empire in prison. Okay, he might have had a lot of friends, but he was also in prison in the empire. That's when he had most of his time. I don't know. I don't have a timetable, but powerless in the empire. And that, to a certain extent, I suspect, because of that vulnerability, helped develop the churches as well. Because he could talk about the people on the margins. He could talk about the needs of the church and the squabbles that existed. So, anyway.
We have one more question or comment. Very well. Oh, one more.
I will make one comment. Give me more than one. One thing I would like to say is we had talked earlier about the exclusivity of St. Luke's and things like that. For someone that was raised in another religion, raised as a hardship Baptist with a family of preachers and deacons, that what you want is to be inclusive. And St. Luke's was one of the first churches I found, visiting several churches, that was inclusive. And that aspect of it is something that I think will translate to millennials and everyone else. Yes, they are higher educated, but education is the key to success. So no one should downplay education. I mean, that is something that, with the legislature now taking $80 million out of education trust fund, that is what I think is a travesty. And how are you going to improve your lot in life if you don't have education
And education isn't just in books, it's education that you want to succeed, that you have a path that's laid out before you. And family is a huge part of that. And without education, you tend to see a lot of breakdowns in family. Because an educated family tends to want their children to be more educated, wants to better take care of them and things like that. So just like I said, it's just, I think at St. Luke's, yes, they are a privileged church. A lot of people that go there were not born privileged. They worked hard over their lives to be able to get there. But they feel at home there because the church is inclusive and not exclusive.
Hey, I'll take that ad any day.
Yeah. How much do you pay? I personally think that we both said some important things. I hope we come away from this not with winners and losers, but a deeper understanding of how we can live into God's hopes and dreams for the world. I spent 40 years in academia and sort of gathering knowledge, and that's been important in my life. But I've never had more fun, and I've never been more passionate than in the last 12 years, because I can live those things that I've talked about in ways. And yes, that's some connectivity to the empire. I think in both of us, there's a little bit of the empire and a little bit of the prophet of resistance. Rich bought me a fancy Dalmatic that I parade around in on certain days, and I just love it. And I have some pretty stoles, and I just love it. Yeah, that's right. I don't know how to pour that wine now. So I love that, and I hope what we come away with is the understanding that this is a partnership. My great concern, though, and we need to find ways to do this, is that there, and in our church, okay, at this point, that cannot be tolerated if we're people of good news. It can't be tolerated. There are problems with drug addiction, there are problems with mental illness in this community, there are racial divides in this community, and there are income inequality divides in this community that are, unfortunately, they're as bad or worse than they were in the 1960s. That's the reality. And the church needs to address it. We need to figure out a way of doing it together.
May I have last word? I want to take this time to thank a prophet, and her name is Katie Ringers. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. She came. Then I'm going to ask you to follow. Katie came to me when we were dreaming of Katie and Josiah's coming to Birmingham, and she said, "I want to preach downtown." And I said, "What the hell does that mean?" And she said, "I want to have service for homeless people in Lynn Park." She made it up as she went along. She went down there all by herself. Many of you worship at Church in the Park. She's enlisted of the clergy. That was her vision. St. Luke's, it gets to bask in the credit for one of our clergy doing something really heroic, but it was her vision, and we simply just brought her to Birmingham to do it. It was all her. This coffee shop, I want to open a coffee shop. I want to open it in Avondale. I said, "Why would you go to Avondale? Nobody's in Avondale." Okay, right. It was her vision. She put this thing in the best block in our city. It is a beacon of light and hope, and it makes us proud to be Episcopalian. And I want you to thank Katie for her vision.
Well, you got her vote, Rich.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you, Mark. Let's get a round of applause for Rich. And while Mark, yeah, oh yes. Mark said in post there weren't winners and losers, but there will be a winner and a loser.
Awesome. But
But thanks thanks to the Empire, and Rich made this comment that the church in the park and the Abbey itself would not exist without the church and the leadership of the Empire, because it is sort of our church as a collective that was able to put up the funding and put up the support and the customers, to make this place happen. And we are also thankful for those prophets of the resistance who continue to encourage the Abbey to reach out just, like 300 yards that direction, which is what we're trying to do, is to continue in our mission to reach out to underprivileged people, to younger people that have been sort of ostracized by the church, to non-Christians and de-churched folks as well. So we are passing around 2 bags, and you may cast your vote that way. And note, Rich and Mark are not going to see what you are putting in each bag, because we told the October Small Thoughts team that they were allowed to ask some trivia questions of Rich and Mark. So we're going to choose a few of these, and they can collaborate.
And the resistance.
All right, so Mark and Rich, Mark, are you listening?
Oh, okay.
Which jungle animal, I can't read Josiah's writing. Which jungle animal must the coffee bean pass through in order to be the best expression of coffee? That's not what.
What is that?
Yeah, what is that? I can see it, but
Quadrumundi.
No, it's not a quadrumundi. And it's not an elephant, no, it's that little animal that people.
Starts with a C.
What is it?
CDM.
What is it? Do y'all sell that coffee bean? That passes through? Did I drink that?
Yummy. Come on,
That was real
All right,
fast.
the civet.
You made that up.
This is not a question.
All right, here's another coffee question. What is an Americano?
It's probably something boring. It's probably watered down espresso.
It's $2.75 for 12 ounce and $3. Thank you. See you next week, folks.
Hey, it's not a contest, Rich. We're supposed to be collaborating.
You're both right. It is a shot of espresso or 2 shots with hot water.
Huh?
All right, here's a hard one. Based on our conversation, what is the median annual family income in Alabama? Mark should know this.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm gonna guess 30.
The lower down, 27.
No, it can't be.
Higher than 27.
It's higher. I would say it's probably like 32. No?
34.
Wow. Hey, see, you can pay me better than that.
That's right.
Am I getting a raise? Am I getting a raise?
Well, you get a raise if you can answer this one. How much does it cost? I think Josiah means the entrance fee. It's a one-time fee to join the Birmingham Country Club.
That's not fair.
How many members here? Come on,
No, he doesn't.
No, I said how many members here?
It's probably about 120,000.
Less.
Less.
Yeah, much less.
Oh.
According
I'm
to the
disappointed.
How much does it cost to join the Birmingham Country Club?
45.
You talking
Now, wait a minute,
about?
junior member or senior member?
I don't know. I
We
didn't write
don't
these
belong to the
questions.
country club. She's a prophet.
35 years ago, a junior member's initiation fee was 5,000. About 25.
It has gone up then, according to this, it is $35,000. Senior member, I got senior member.
The Irondale Swimming Tennis Club was 5.
$5.
All right, and I'll combine these last 2 questions. Number 1, how many homeless people are said to sleep on the street every night in Birmingham?
Well,
And how many people are members of the Birmingham Country Club?
All right.
Two numbers here.
When I was doing the
They
study,
happen to be the same number.
They are the same.
well, okay, I mean, it's just the most recent statistics of the ones that
Well,
I-
Josiah said,
Well-
it must be true.
Well, it used to be about 3,000, but the last count, which, and if Josiah's saying this, I could contest it, because I know these statistics, but it's about,
Yeah, but he's not here.
it's about, the last count on the streets was 15, was about 15,000, 1,500, I'm sorry.
1,500.
Yeah, about.
Let's hear, how about the country club?
Pull your phone out again.
600. So y'all, you can go,
600,
yeah.
he's wrong.
You can go to
There's not
the top.
600. No, he's wrong.
Okay, and so the reason that Josiah.
Let me just say, the firehouse shelter last year served over the course of the year 3,000. So, I mean, that wasn't all just in terms of.
And 600, what are you saying, 600?
600.
Josiah.
Where is he?
But, no, Josiah went home before.
He's
these
a false
questions-
prophet.
But the reason, friends, that Josiah was allowed to come up with these questions at all is because he will be participating in the next Small Talk on Large Matters feisty conversation against the Reverend Thomas Joyner, who is the Episcopal student chaplain at Trinity Commons. And their chosen topic is just war or just peace. Can Christians ever be justified in using violence? So I did not write down the date for that, but it is sometime in October. And the same way you found out about this event is how you will find October 15th is good to have a weekend. And it looks like we have an announcement. We will not name amounts in the bags, but we will name a favorite clergy person of the empire.
If it's the corporate of the empire, then it's gonna be rich. Yeah, she's already below this. This is like, it's not.